Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms related, policy, culture, movies, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment to like and share this program, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube, or you're listening to us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. Let your friends know that this is the place where they need to be right about now. Also, please take a moment to go to fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. I talk about it every day. I know you're tired of it, but it is the spot. If you want to get pro-Second Amendment gear, stuff that shows your support for the Second Amendment, this is the place to go. We've got T-shirts, we've got hoodies, we've got coffee mugs, we've got all sorts of stuff with all sorts of cool Second Amendment sayings. All you really got to do is go there. And the great part about it is you know that every penny that you spend is going to go right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. Okay, so now that we have officially paid the bills, wanted to get into a topic today, and I have a good friend with me who's going to help us kind of talk a little bit about this. And and I've told you these stories before. Whenever I go into a legislature and I start talking about concealed carry, or whenever they start hearing about the idea of concealed carry, they always tend to act like, well, they want to treat gun owners with concealed carry permits as though they're like every other, like criminals who are carrying firearms. So those who are illegally carrying firearms, they want to treat them the same exact and want to act like individuals with concealed carry permits are exactly the same person. Well, and you can explain that, but to them, the idea of the fact that you just because you want to have a gun or have a firearm on you to defend yourself must mean that you are a bad person, and therefore bad things are going to happen simply because there are guns around. Well, now we have the opportunity to actually discuss a study that was done that actually, disproves that. It was a study that was done, and we've actually brought in, once again, a good friend from Doctors for Responsible Government in order to help us better understand this study and to be able to, I totally messed up the name of the organization. It's Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. And I'm looking at Dr. Young as he is laughing at me right now. So with that, I will welcome Dr. Rob Young to the show. Go ahead, make fun of me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
All right. As well as ever, I see.
Oh, most definitely.
Having chatted with you before.
All right. So tell us a little bit about this study now that I've now flubbed up the name.
All right. Well, the study's title is State-Level Firearm Concealed Carry Legislation and Rates of Homicide and Violent Crime. And I'll apologize to everyone to start with, because to talk about a study, there are a lot of fine points. I don't have the text memorized, so I'll be looking at it sometimes to make sure I get it right. That's all. This has just come out online by the Journal of the American College of Surgeons, which in surgery is comparable to the American College of Physicians. A very prestigious group. It's not all surgeons. It's just those who have chosen to do extra service and academic, pay more academic attention to their specialty. And we have a DRGO member named Mark Hamill, who's a surgeon at Carilion School of Medicine of Virginia Tech University. He's the lead author on this, along with 5 or 6 other surgeons. And he got interested in that question. Now, Craig, you and I, and probably many of our viewers and listeners already know that rates of concealed carry in states do not necessarily correlate with rates of violent crime or homicide. And in some cases, such as the work by John Lott, which is excellent, we know that they appear to correlate with lower rates of violent crime and homicide. But what we have never seen before is a good study appearing in a major medical journal of some kind, um, addressing a topic like this objectively. There have been lots of them that are bad science, badly designed, uh, well, unless you consider good design a design to get the kind of results they're after, which is negative for gun ownership. This one is well designed and objective, and took its data from good sources, used a number of US government sites to track violent crime and homicide. Tracking changes in legislation among 51 jurisdictions is a pretty daunting task, and there are no general databases or clearinghouses for that. So they went to each state to look up what may have been done each year during their study period, which was, sorry about that, 30 years, from 86 all the way through 2015. And they had to put all that together. They considered a change to be effective in the year it was made. That's a little bit, that's a convention, and you have to choose something. Obviously, changes in law will have some increased effect during following years. Although I would say for concealed carry, when concealed carry loosens, as has been always the case in these changes, people do tend to jump on it fast and take advantage of it. So with that, they compared those things. They controlled for some economic factors, poverty rates, unemployment statistics, not much else. And I would say you don't have to worry about much else when you're talking about very general issues like this. And their result is very simply put. There is no correlation between rates of concealed carry and leniency, to use their word, the leniency of concealed carry laws and rates of homicide or violent crime in states, period. Some of us think it's a good thing for reducing those things, and that's fine. But really, it's much harder to prove a positive like that than it is to prove the absence of a correlation. And from my point of view, having reviewed and critiqued many many bad studies by the anti-gun researchers for the past few years, and looking back all the way to the 1980s when they started doing this. This is a good article. It's solid research. It's straightforward. It's simple. It's addressing one specific question with good methodology, and it shows that you can't claim that concealed carry increases anything violent. Period.
Right, which, it's kind of interesting because in a lot of these, what politicians try to do is they say, well, there may be if there's a correlation, then they try to refer to it as a causation, meaning, well, right. Just because it's like saying, right. Just because you're going down the same direction doesn't mean that if A and B are going down the same direction, they may be headed. You may be able to prove they're headed the same direction, but that doesn't mean that A is making B go there. The politicians are always trying to say, or the media are always trying to say that, well, if A and B are going down the same path, well, A must be dragging B along with it. Meaning, right. They're trying to say that concealed carry is always loose or lenient concealed carry laws are basically causing an increase in violent crime.
Right. That's what they'd like to say, and that's what some of these anti-gun researchers purport to prove, and you can't prove that. John Lott, is just an outstandingly serious, thoughtful expert researcher. He doesn't claim when he finds more guns associated with less crime that is the only possible cause. So these guys, my friend and these other guys, are being very straightforward, and that's the only way you can do real science. Um, that's the important finding, though. It doesn't correlate with increases in violent crime. We know that it shouldn't. These are legal gun owners. They've been shown to be uh, highly responsible citizens as a group. Their rates of criminal activity themselves is not only lower than the general population, but lower than that of law enforcement officers as a group. So we know there's no way that happens. It's criminals who increase violent crimes. It's criminals who increase homicide. Uh, the great thing is that we are going to see this published in print now in January in the Journal of the American College of Surgeons. It's one of the most prestigious ones out there. Ranks up there with New England Journal, Lancet, JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association. I was privileged to be a reviewer for this, so I had some small hand in helping them revise it and convincing the journal that it should be published. And I'm just very, very proud to see this happen. It's a first. It really is a landmark in the acceptance of valid research that happens to support the position that people of the gun already have had and know. And it needs to be out there in this way. So I'm so pleased.
On kind of on a different note, so, I don't know if you know, here in the state of California, we've actually, the state has actually created this gun violence research center at the University of California, Davis, by Garen Wintemute, who is a known anti-gun activist. We also know that the CDC refuses to, even though they are not barred from studying firearm deaths, or quote unquote gun violence. And they simply won't do it because they can't advocate. Tell me, what sort of research is that? One, is research going on? Number two, verify to me the fact that, that the CDC actually can do research, and give me kind of your thoughts on why they're not.
Okay. I have a number of thoughts on the whole subject. If we have time for me to share them.
Oh, right? Please do.
Garen Wintemute, our dear friend, who got himself a lifetime sinecure, funding by millions of dollars of your tax money, Craig. It's just awful.
Please don't remind me.
I know. I live in New York State, which is another bad state for gun rights. But no, I don't think we compare to California, and we're not. They're way. I don't know. We'll see. Of course, our entire state government has become Democrat run now. With this election yesterday, so we'll see about that. That's a sad tangent. So
yeah, we've been there in California for a little bit now.
Yeah, and I don't want to go any farther here. So back to the CDC. No, the Dickey Amendment, and I believe it was 1994, which was influenced strongly by testimony by our founder, Tim Wheeler, Miguel Faria, a couple of other prominent voices back then, only prohibits the CDC from doing things to advocate a particular position, an anti-gun position. It's never restricted them from doing research. Now, Congress followed that lead and has never specifically designated a significant amount of money for gun research either. So the CDC, when they say they aren't allowed to, well, they basically have not been funded to, but they haven't been not permitted to. And Craig, they did in the late 90s. You may remember Gary Kleck's seminal contribution in the early 90s when he found that there are probably as many as 2.5 million defensive gun uses each year in the United States back then. And that was well before the huge concealed carry revolution in laws permitting it more and more across the country. So many more people now, 17 million people now have concealed carry permits. That doesn't even count the folks in states with constitutional carry, and no need to get a permit. Back then, it was only a few million. So, um, well, apparently the CDC wondered about that because very recently, as I'm sure you know, but I don't think a lot of people know this, Gary Kleck discovered that the CDC had done another study in the late 90s that essentially replicated the questions he asked in his survey, uh, from which he drew his conclusions. And he wrote this up, and they did a good job asking the right questions. Um, and he reviewed this twice, in fact, because his first review, uh, there was a question left about how to generalize the data from the number of states the CDC surveyed to the entire country. Gary's survey covered the entire country the first time. Having answered those, as I believe was correct, the states the CDC survey reviewed really are quite representative states of all sorts. Uh, the CDC itself found that there are certainly around 1.2 million, say about at least half of what Dr. Kleck came up with. The CDC found that out. And then somehow it never got published.
Funny how that happens.
It was never referenced in any CDC publication. It was never delivered to Congress's or anyone. It's just so sad. I feel so bad for the CDC professionals back then who are carrying this burden now to have discovered that they did not share something useful that was taxpayer funded for the taxpayers. Although I think we can imagine why it didn't get publicized. At that point, the CDC essentially dropped looking into whether or not they could, I would say validate, but I think we should say contradict the kinds of findings that criminologists and economists have been finding all along.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one big reason the CDC hasn't done significant gun research is because it was too scared to.
I would tend to agree with you. One of the things that I would like to see is just a concerted effort to be able to go through, look at the methodology, because as once again, as you're starting to see, because not just California but other states now are trying to put together opportunities or centers to study this stuff, to study guns and gun violence with the purpose of finding ways to restrict the Second Amendment rights of people. Because right now, legislators are making decisions based on faulty or misleading or no information at all.
Well, that's what they're best at, of course, in all spheres.
And what they're in essence doing is with these centers is they're trying to create data to support the positions that they feel are the right positions.
Of course, because appealing to voters' emotions is always more effective than providing good hard data for them to judge on. Not only California, Craig, Massachusetts is now doing this. New Jersey has just taxpayer-funded a program like this. In New York State last year, this was proposed, and only the Democrat Assembly and Governor wanted it. The Republican Senate stopped it, and now we no longer have a Republican Senate here. So you can see where it's going to go here.
So before we go, if you do us a favor real quick and just talk to our listeners and viewers real quick a little bit about Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership and how folks can follow the work that you're doing.
Sure. We're a group not just of doctors, but really of anyone who wants to support us. We're particularly for all folks in healthcare who believe in the Second Amendment and support responsible civilian gun ownership. We started about 1994. Dr. Tim Wheeler started it when he got frustrated with what was going on with the CDC. And we invite anybody to come look at www.drgo.us and find out about us. Now, one very important mission we're on now is to help people find doctors and other healthcare providers who understand the Second Amendment, understand the value of gun ownership, and are not going to harp and harass with the faulty idea that people can only be safe by getting rid of their guns. We've had a great response to this. About at least 3 times as many people have asked for referrals as the number of providers that we've found so far. So we are always hoping to entice more and more providers to sign up, but we are accepting potential patient requests, and we are hooking people up wherever we can find the right kind of provider nearby. So please don't hesitate to check us out. You can get there from our homepage. You can get straight there at 2, that's the numeral, 2adoc.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. We appreciate the work that you do. You know, we here in California, we've had your members come and testify before the legislature, and it is so immensely helpful, because it's one thing to have, you know, me, a lobbyist, there. They know what perspective I'm coming from, but when I can bring a doctor to the table to basically share the information, share real facts and information, in order to, you know, it really helps, because it's, once again, it's about bringing those experts to the table. So once again, thank you so very much for the work that you do. We very much appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay, Craig, thank you, and you take care.
I most definitely will. All right, folks. Well, hey, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you guys liking and sharing, once again, liking and sharing these videos, telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. As you know, we are the home in the fight for civil rights. Remember, you got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.